after they graduated, they wanted to pursue a career and they could not find one here in Pima County. They had to leave home. As a father, this breaks my heart. As a taxpayer, it makes me mad. What we have to do is make an environment conducive to attracting and keeping and growing jobs in this community. And one key that we have that I believe unlocks the door to economic development that will keep our kids and grandkids here and provide jobs and economic prosperity is in the form of the Sonoran Corridor. And it makes perfect sense. You have the confluence of I-19 and I-10. This whole corridor is Mexico pounding on the door for trade and transportation. It's supposed to provide some $400 million annually to Pima County in terms of growth. I worked on that in the State Transportation Board, and I got that 184 offshoot from the Mariposa Port of Entry to increase trade in the 5-year plan. That was the first time it had ever been done. We have in that Sonoran Corridor, in addition to the confluence of I-19 and I-10 and the connection thereof, we have Raytheon, we have Tucson International Airport, we have the Port of Tucson, we have the UP, we have the U of A Tech Park, we have all the business parks. That is where the cluster, right up the street, that will permeate over into District 4, and will provide jobs and growth and increase home values in our community and in our district. And all we need to do is work with that Sonoran Corridor. It makes perfect sense for high-tech jobs. Get the county out of the way, get private enterprise in there, and create more jobs and keep our kids and grandkids in Pima County.
Has anyone tried to build a house starting with the roof? Doesn't seem to make sense, does it? You can't build a house starting with the roof. You have to start with the foundation of the home first. And that's exactly what we need to be doing in our Pima County. Bringing projects like the Sonoran Corridor might be fine, but that's starting with the roof. We need to concentrate on creating a business environment that people are going to want to come and start their businesses, that families are going to want to move to. How do we do that? We start first with cutting. I've been in the Board of Supervisors meetings. I've been going there for over a year and a half. There's plenty of things to cut. Wasteful spending, irresponsible spending. Then we take that money and we put it towards our roads to start to inch away and help develop our infrastructure. Because why? Businesses like nice infrastructure, as do families. We like nice roads to drive on. And it's part of what is driving business away is because we're not putting our money towards that. We need to create a low debt, and a low tax environment. I know I've mentioned this before, but I keep wanting to drive that point home because it's just so important. Then we can work on working on our businesses and attracting our businesses and expanding our tax base so the little guy, you and me, doesn't have to be pummeled by taxes. That's why we can put forth all the projects that we want. But has our history not shown that when companies come here and they realize that their roads are crumbling, their deputies have left them, and their education stinks, do they stay here? No, they leave.
You said cutting. Give me a very quick example of 2 or 3 areas where you think we need to cut.
Stop suing everyone. Stop suing the state and losing, actually. Look at environmental construction regulations for improved efficiency and savings. Make sure metrics and goals are achieved before renewing contracts, and I'll bring up TRIO. The president of TRIO, a nonprofit, for those of you who don't know, TRIO is an economic organization that is contracted with the county to improve our economy and our economic development in Pima County. The president of that organization makes $300,000 a year. It's a nonprofit organization.
Okay, you've answered it. Thank you. 30-second follow-up.
So for all the heat that Supervisor Miller takes, I wanted to point out that although I was traveling 75% of the time last year, not able to attend the Board of Supervisor meetings, although the county doesn't record the meetings themselves, Supervisor Miller records and posts the videos. So any of you can watch a year's worth of videos and learn what everything that's been going on for the past year and get caught up. The other thing is with TRIO, it was kind of interesting. As I was starting my campaign, I was trying to learn as much as I could, of course, and I went to the TRIO website, and they had listed 109 success stories. I clicked on it, and I got malware has infected this site.
Okay.
I believe it's called Sun Corridor now, not Trio, but.
Correct.
Yes,
That's
you're all right.
but, my whole approach when it comes to economic development is to look very quickly at the makeup of the Board of Supervisors. If you take all the collective years of service that all the current city boards of supervisors, take out Miller because she's only been there 4 years, and you include the county administrator, and you add all those years together of service, you'll come up to 90 years. Not one of those years did any one of them ever own or operate their own privately funded capitalized business in Pima County. So when the business community goes to them and says, we have a problem, and they look at the business community like they're from Mars because they have no idea. I will bring 40 years of business experience to that board, and that'll be a change.
Thank you. Ms. Closen, do you want to
What's the deal with the point of clarification?
I'm not sure what you mean.
That's because I just made that up.
Okay.
Mr. Christy says he's owned and operated a business for 40 years, but I did hear you say on the radio that you've owned and operated a business for 10 years, and your father-in-law owned it for 30. I was just wondering is that allowed? No, I was just wondering, because he's mentioned that he's been a business owner for 40 years.
I can answer that.
I started in my stepfather's business.
Okay.
In 1976 as a lot boy. So when I say owned and operated, I began in 76 as a lot boy, and I worked my way up through management in all of the departments, became part owner and general manager in the 80s, and then full owner and operator in the late 90s. So if you want to parse where I was in the last 40 years.
No.
It was in my business. All my business was in 40 years.
Thank you. All right, so I think Mr. Becker brought up open space. I heard that those words come from your lips. And there's two views on open space. I'm going to ask you which side of the open space view you're on. And I saw my good friend Al Melton earlier today. When Al and I wrote in the legislature, this was a big issue. Only 13% of the state of Arizona is in private hands. The rest of the state is owned by the government. Yet in Pima County, voters approved a $200 million open space bond, and then just last year rejected the $95 million open space bond. Some people argue that this sets aside space for habitat protection, recreation opportunities, bike riding, things like that. And other people would argue that it takes private property off the tax rolls, increasing the tax burden on other taxpayers by removing that land and removing the tax base that goes with it. So what is your view on open space, and what do you think the purpose is? And I think we'll go to Mr. Christy. We'll go with you first.
I've asked a lot of people, how much money has the county spent over the years in open space? I never get the same answer. I ask people, what is the purpose of open space? I never get the same answer. Do we have access to it? Does the public be able to be paid for it? Are we able to have any time on it or to look at it? And I never get the right answer. It is, in my estimation, at this point where we have more than enough open space to protect our wonderful environment that we all love here in Pima County. That's a huge asset, and as a businessman, you want your assets to work for you, and we want to promote our pristine environment, our high Sonoran desert, and all the wildlife and the flora and the fauna that go with it, and why we love it, why we want to stay here, and why we encourage other people to go. But it comes to the point where it's disallowing and inhibiting private capital to come in and create a tax base where we can develop it, where we can utilize it, and we can have job growth, and we can have increased tax revenue, and we can have a high quality life. And there is a balance between protecting our environment and allowing economic development and residential development. And it's got to the point where if you don't follow certain guidelines or you don't follow certain trails as far as it comes to open space in the environment, you're vilified as a demon. And that's not the case when we need desperately jobs in Pima County, and the open space concept, I believe, has done more damage to the environment as far as the business community is concerned than anything else.
If you stop to think about it, 100% of our tax revenues come from 17% of our property taxes. what Mr. Becker said is correct. 83% of our land is owned by the government, not by private people like you and me. I believe that selling some of that land to increase our tax base and open up to the tax rolls is a good idea and definitely worth looking into. I also have been doing a little research and investigating, because I've been at this for a year or so, and have come up with the fact that the county has approximately 4,500 vacant properties and parcels of land that are sitting there collecting dust. Why can't we sell those vacant properties, maybe even at a discount? Take those revenues and the tax revenues and put it directly into a road fund. That was one of my road fund ideas.
So, as a Cubmaster of PAC 328 here in Green Valley, I have a lot of respect for the environment and for those open spaces. I've spent many a trip with the young boys, out in the wilderness, helping them grow and learn and become better adults, more giving and more productive adults. However, if with the policies that the county has now, since businesses don't want to come here, why not just turn all of it into open land? No, I'm just kidding. Seriously though, we need open space. There needs to be a healthy balance, as has been said. But I don't see where the county needs to buy a plot of land in the middle of the city from a church at more than appraised value. I'm not going to take the Cub Scouts there. So let's get rid of the land that we don't have to have, help bring in more tax base, and still preserve the truly open land that makes us unique here in Pima County.
Any follow-ups?
Okay, Ms. Closen, we'll start with you. County Administrator Chuck Huckleberry's contract is up early next year. Would you support a new contract for him? Why or why not?
No, I would not. I believe our county over the last 22 years has been 20 years roughly, has been deteriorating, and I'm in the military, and have y'all heard Harry Truman's saying, the buck stops here? He's the county administrator, and if this deterioration has occurred under his watch, then I think it's time for a new county administrator.
The simple answer is no. I think he should be dusting off the reservoir. To use a sports analogy, if you've got a sports team that's not performing, you change the coach. It doesn't mean the coach is a bad guy, or maybe he doesn't even know how to coach. Maybe he could go to another county and do a lot better. Let's give him that opportunity.
I thought that the Board of Supervisors was the coach.
No, he's the coach. We're the starting five.
I've heard rumors to the effect that Mr. Huckleberry is strongly considering retirement, and I would strongly encourage him to do so. That would be an optimal time. We can have a transparent, seamless, smooth transition for a new administrator where the community can be involved. We can pick and choose and vet our own candidates, where we wouldn't have the baggage behind. I get started on the Board of Supervisors with a fresh, clean slate. It would be ideal if he took the high road and said, I've been 20 years, which is long enough, and I'm ready to retire. That would be the ideal situation. It would be a smooth transition with everybody involved in the replacement. However, if Mr. Huckleberry, for whatever reason, decides not to retire and his contract comes before me as a board member, I will vote to not renew his contract.
No. All right, so we talked about the RTA a little bit earlier, and I would say that at first I was a bit of a skeptic about the RTA, but it's turned out to be actually quite well run, and it's doing some really good things in the community. But it was only approved by the voters the last 20 years. We're about halfway through. We have 10 years left to go. So the question is, would you support, once again, referring to the voters as the supervisors? That's part of what you're able to do, is either refer bonds or other things like that. Would you consider referring to the voters a modification of that plan, which would include either extending it for an additional 10 years or 20 years, or increasing the half-cent sales tax to expand the projects and the portfolio that the RTA currently has and continue with the program, or would you support just letting it expire at the end of its 20-year period? And I think we're going to Mr. Backer first.
Well, I think we would have to put some changes in. And again, to reference Supervisor Miller's plan, she's put on the table to extend it 10 years, keep it still a half-cent sales tax, but to kind of shift the focus to repairing the roads. And not just the arterial roads, but also the neighborhood roads. And equitably divide up the revenue amongst the different cities and towns and counties based on their miles of roads to where the roads can get fixed in a reasonable time frame, in the 20-year time frame.
All right, Mr. Christy.
As an individual who served on the original Citizens Advisory Committee for the Regional Transportation Authority, as someone who served on the Regional Transportation Authority for 5 years and chaired it, to answer your question directly, I would work to reauthorize the RTA. It is the best model we have for roads and the construction of infrastructure improvements. It is a limited, narrow focus and mission, and there is no room for gamesmanship among the jurisdictions. And there is a distinct planning and budgeting process that have got over 700 projects on time and under budget. And they've kept their promises. I would work towards the reauthorization of it. And in this reauthorization, I would move that there would be a plan for maintenance. At that particular time, that would take voter approval to do that. I would work with all my effort as a supervisor to encourage that plan be reauthorized with maintenance in it, and at that particular time, because of the structure of the RTA, we can determine where our projects are as far as monetary funding and where they need to be, and how and where and under what circumstances financially we can include maintenance and where our priorities of maintenance are. That's the great thing about the regional plan of the Regional Transportation Authority. It's not dictated by any one singular jurisdiction. It's dictated by everybody in our region, and everybody gets a piece of the pie, and everybody has something to say about it. So I would, to answer your question, I would work for the reauthorization, and at some point down the road, it would take a lot more than just public reauthorization to raise the tax. You have to get legislative approval of the Phoenix Board, which would be a difficult challenge. But there may come a time, with the will of the public, with the will of the community, they may see the value in increasing that tax to not only include maintenance of neighborhoods and thoroughfares, but to keep on the ongoing construction projects that are already in place.
Okay, I'm going to clarify that. So step one is to just, you grant that it's working, the RTA is working, but step one would be kind of reconfigure and put some of that aside for maintenance.
See, the RTA has distinct
Right.
Chapters, if you will, of where their mission is. Maintenance is not.
So isn't that changing gears on voters then?
That is going to
10 years ago said we want it to go for new projects.
Correct, because the jurisdictions were supposed to provide the maintenance, and they haven't.
Okay, so, and then if there isn't enough money, then you would look at possibly raising the half-cent sales tax.
If that was in the same manner that the community would want, yes.
Okay.
My turn? Okay. The RTA has 10 years left. $1 billion in revenues are expected in a good year, a good 10 years. I believe I'm not going to choose either one of your choices that you gave me. I'm going to come up with another one, which is reauthorize the remaining 10 years of the RTA jurisdictional projects to help fix our roads. That's not going to be a quick fix. It requires RTA approval, it requires possibly state approval, and it requires voter approval again. So that's a possibility for a long-term fix for our roads. I do not think that the RTA should be in charge of an additional, okay, let's pretend we're done with the 10 years now, and people want to vote to have an additional sales tax for an additional 10 years. I believe that responsibility must remain with a responsible county leadership. I do not think that it should be put in the RTA hands. Not that the RTA hasn't done good things, they've done some very good things. And they can handle part of the maintenance if we reauthorize it for the existing projects they have now. But I believe that the main thrust of road maintenance and pavement preservation should be under county jurisdiction. Mainly because the RTA is going to require voter approval every, I don't know, what it'd be 10 years or 20 years. We have to come up with an election and push the RTA every time we want our roads approved. I think it should remain in county jurisdiction. If we're gonna have a sales tax, it should be under the county.
Hold on a second, I want to clarify that. So then you're saying reauthorize the RTA for the next 10 years, and would it all go toward maintenance?
No, a small percentage of it
Okay.
would go towards it, because it's got projects in
Sure.
progress right now.
Okay, very good. 30 seconds for anybody to rebut.
Ms. Clausen said something about putting the road construction, the RTA mission back under the control of the county.
No.
The very reason why the RTA was formed was to get it out of the control of the county, and that it should stay out of the county's hands. And the Regional Transportation Authority is what it is regionally, not county, but regionally. They wanted to get it out of the jurisdiction's hands and into a regional entity, and to keep it from the control of the county government. Ms. Clausen, you want to respond to that?
Yes, that's not quite correct. I was saying that the roads, maintenance, and pavement preservation should remain under county jurisdiction. I don't want to take anything away from the RTA, what they're doing now. They seem to be doing some decent work. So why not continue with the good thing, right? I just don't think our overall big picture maintenance of roads should be under the RTA jurisdiction. It needs to be under the county leadership jurisdiction. And the reason our roads aren't getting done is because this 20-year leadership has not had the will to fix our roads.
All right, I need to follow through, because I'm getting confused now. So, right now, as it stands, the RTA has been authorized for 20 years. Okay, so we have 10 years left to go. You don't have to approve for the next 10 years. It's approved already. Okay, so 10 years from now, it will end, because it is in statute through the voter approval process that it will die at the end of its 20 years, whether the projects it was supposed to do are done or not. It ends at 20 years. I asked, would you extend it for an additional 10, or would you let it die? That's kind of what I was getting. So we had some cloud there. So you had said about 10 years for maintenance and something else, and that's what I was wondering. So are you for letting it end at 20 years, or would you be okay with extending it for an additional 10 after the 20 years is over?
I think we need to cross that bridge when we get closer to it.
Okay.
I believe if we're going to have an additional sales tax, it needs to be under county jurisdiction. This is a future plan. We need a now plan. And in order to have a now plan, we need to cut what we need to cut to start funneling it into our road repair at a county level.
10 years goes really fast. That's why I was going to say. So, Mr.
I know.
Just very quickly, Ms. Clausen kind of poo-poos the whole RTA plan, as they've done some pretty good things. Let me tell you, they've done 700 roadway and transportation improvements in this county over the last 10 years. Many of them right here in Green Valley and Sahuarita. And for her to brush it off as doing a pretty good job shows that she does not have a full grasp of what roads and infrastructure need to be in this community, and that the RTA is the most effective and meaningful plan that we have as far as fixing our roads.
How do you know? Because they don't do road maintenance.
All right. Hey, we're going to go to the last. We're going to go to the last question, and then we're going to let each of you give your closing statements. So the bonding system that was established by the state of Arizona and given authority to cities and counties in the state of Arizona was established almost 7 years ago to allow local governments to borrow money for the purposes of adding infrastructure, sewer plants, road construction, new courthouses, and whatnot. It seems over the last few years that both local here in the city of Tucson and Pima County have not been using bonds for that purpose. We have a bond review committee that basically approves bonds. I'll give you an example. The road maintenance bonds. Generally, you don't use bonds for maintenance. You use bonds to build new roads and then HERF revenue to maintain those roads. You use bonds to build a new sewer treatment plant. You use bonds to build infrastructure. But it seems that we've gotten away from that, and we're now using bonds for just keeping the lights on, which I think is something that's scary. If county governments basically can then put the taxpayers in a position where if you don't approve the bond, we're gonna turn your lights off, or turn your sewers off, or not pave your roads. So what would you do to change the bond culture with regard to the bond committee that the county has to ensure that bonds are what they were intended to do, and that's to add new infrastructure, not maintain old infrastructure, Ms. Clausen?
Well, I think we've already made a step in the right direction by defeating the $816 million worth of bonds. What the voters have to come up and say, we don't want bonds. Our county is $1.4 billion in debt, that's with a B. We would have added over $1 billion in additional debt had those bonds passed. I am not against bonds entirely, but our county does not have the economic solidity to be bonding for everything. We need to get back to basics. We need to reinforce our county economic infrastructure. And I mentioned all of this before, of the things that I think we need to do to create an economically productive county. And we need to provide our roads from our trimmed budget and our savings, not from bond sales.
So to put it in terms that an average person, might face, I see bonds as the payday loan business. If somebody's not getting by day to day, they go to the payday loan provider. Now they're paying interest on top of the problems they already have. They still have the same problems. They haven't fixed them. They've kicked the can down the road and made their situation worse. Bonds should only be used for infrastructure projects, for things that are true investments, that we fully expect more benefit to come back from than just spending that money now. If we're trying to raise bonds to just pay our day-to-day business, that's so wrong. We've got to fix the root cause of the problem, which is managing the budget correctly, setting proper priorities.
Mr. Christy.
It comes back to business experience, opening and operating your own business, and how you would approach financial issues with your business. One of the worst things you can do is run up corporate debt with high interest rates, long-term repayment plans. The bonding capacity and the bonding issues of Pima County are nothing more than a credit card run amok. And this county has had its fair share of bonding. We're still paying for bonds. I believe that if you take a business person's approach to how you're going to manage your money, how you're going to set your priorities, where you're going to trim waste, and where you're going to make economic development pay for the things that we really need to be paid for, and economic development should pay for those things. That's where our priority should be, and not the heavily addictive reliance on bonds to pay for things that we shouldn't be paying for.
All right, any third, second follow-ups? None?
I have a quick one. District 4 rejected the bonds in the biggest percentage of any other district. I was on the bond committee to defeat the bonds. I was an official spokesman, and that reinforces the fact of how strongly I feel that bonding is not the way to go.
Anybody else? We're going to close it off now. You'll each have 2 minutes to give your. 1 minute. I'm sorry. Thanks, Dan. He's keeping me. That's why we're here. We're yin and yang.
I read the notes.
All right. So, Mr. Back, we're going to start with you. You get 1 minute, and then you'll each close 1 minute.
Thank you for your time today to come and listen to us speak. I've got nothing but respect for both of my opponents. I think Pima County would be great with any of us. But I think we need to look at how we choose our candidates and have over the past 20 years. Is it the person with the most wealth, the most political connections, the name we've heard most often? That hasn't served us well over the past 20 years. Me, as someone who's never ran for office before, an average citizen, I'm here to make a difference, and I don't owe anything to anyone other than to each of you. And I think a testimony to that is the laughs that I've had out of this campaign piece. It says, "Does county government leave a bad taste in your mouth?" And it's a box of mints. If you're laughing, you agree with me, you can get yours back in the back of the room.
I want to thank you all also for your time and effort to be down here. It means a lot to me as well. 40 years of owning and operating a